You think you know what nuns do at 11:30 p.m., right? But for the two sisters in Dubuque, Iowa, no matter what we can try and guess, high chances your answer might be wrong. The crazy part is that monks, nuns, priests, and those in the clergy have been seeing and documenting their UFO sightings for centuries. I'm Cristina Gomez, and we'll be covering all of that and more on this episode of UFO Case Studies.
You're still going clear. Or what do you suggest?
Hello and welcome. I'm happy that everyone is catching this live. I'm very excited for this episode. We're going to be covering a lot with the main focus being on the Clarke sisters because there is some very interesting stuff to it. And this story came and left. It was published in an article and then it got buried. And we're going to talk about that. But on August 18th, 1965, at 11:30 p.m., started like any other day in Dubuque, Iowa. Sister Mary Justa was preparing her nightly routine at the Clarke Church when an unusual light caught her attention through the window. How did I get there? My pictures weren't even in order in that moment, but this is live, so we get those little hiccups. But what's interesting here is that Sister Mary Xavier, chairman of the college's speech and drama department, joined her colleague at the window of like, hey, did you see that strange thing? And the sister said, yeah, that's so weird. What is going on? And they did something that you probably wouldn't imagine. And that was they didn't pray immediately. They didn't do that. Instead, they immediately grabbed their binoculars to see what was going on. And here's an image rendition of that because these binoculars were just casually sitting on the nightstand. And through these binoculars, they observed something strange hovering in the night sky at 11:30 p.m. And according to them, the object displayed a distinctive, and this is their words, banana or cigar-like shape, but what captured their attention was the unusual pink light emanating from the end, which was reminiscent to a torch's flame. And then to gauge the size, because these women are smart, they compared it to a familiar reference point, which is the red warning light. Here's the newspaper clipping. But they looked at this radio tower and they tried to figure out how big this thing was or how far away it was. And then the comparison suggested that this merely wasn't a distant light, but something of considerable size. Now, the object's behavior defied conventional explanation. For 5 minutes, it remained perfectly still. And it was just right next to the radio tower. Then, without warning, it began what the sisters described as dancing about the sky or dancing in the sky, executing movements that no known aircraft of 1965 could achieve. And the entire encounter lasted 30 minutes before the object gradually moved westward and disappeared from view. So people were confused. They were like, what's going on? But what makes this sighting particularly compelling was the environmental context. Now, keep this in mind because this will be a reoccurring theme in the other cases that we'll be covering. Because the sky hung heavy with clouds, followed by an earlier rain shower, conditions that should have limited the visibility of conventional aircraft or even celestial bodies like Venus. Yet both sisters maintained a clear view of the object through their observation. And perhaps most intriguing was the fact that there was this local reaction of animals. So while this was happening at 11:30 at night, The animals are going crazy, very specifically the dogs, because as the object hovered overhead, dogs throughout the entire neighborhood became increasingly agitated, a phenomenon repeatedly documented in UFO encounters across the decades. I know you know this. But the sisters' professional standing at the Clarke College combined with their measured and detailed observations, because they were looking at the weather, they were looking at this object through binoculars. They try to kind of gauge on how big it was because of the radio tower right next to it and their background. These were educated women as well. They were teachers, they were working at the college. And so this really set their sighting apart from some other UFO reports of the era. Now, these weren't individuals seeking attention or prone to flights of fancy. They're nuns. If anything, they want to be left in the background. And notice their immediate thought was not, oh my gosh, it is a message from an angel. Let's start praying. No, that wasn't their mentality at all in 1965. They were skeptical and grabbed the binoculars first before making any conclusions. But here, what I think that they might have asked themselves during that time, I have a few thoughts that if I were in their shoes, what would be going through my mind with the background of an education, but a background also on faith as well. So here are some questions that I thought of. And that is, what is our duty as nuns in response to this? Now, the sisters might have reflected on their responsibility to their religious community and their students should they report the sighting to the church, share it with others, or keep it completely private. But they told their report to the Telegraph, which I think kind of suggests that they wrestled with this thought of balancing faith and the need to document the event. But then I thought of another question. Is this a test of our faith or a call to trust God more deeply? Now, I'm going to give you a reason to why I thought of that question, but just hold on to that. Because Catholic teachings encourage that when they're facing something unknown, to either talk to God about it or to kind of rationalize it amongst themselves. Now, the sisters might have asked if the UFO was a challenge to their beliefs, testing their trust in God, or an invitation to see it as part of a divine mystery that they weren't meant to fully grasp. Now, again, I want you to hold on to that second question because it's going to be very relevant in this article that was released. There's a little section right here. And if you can't read it, don't worry, I got you because it's really important. But the only data that we have about the UFO sighting is this newspaper clipping, which is a bummer. It really is. But also a bit strange that nobody wanted to touch the case after it happened. There are many times when these UFO reports are mentioned to the world, really. And there are those that are very eager to either be the first to drop the story or to research the encounter. But this was a kind that was a one and done deal. Like that was it. This one article came out and it's hard to find extra information online. There have not been any books that I've come across that document this case. All we have is this newspaper clipping. Except, here's the however part, is that the Clarke College incident was not an isolated event, but rather part of a larger pattern emerging across Iowa and neighboring states. And here's why. And it's even mentioned in this article. Because just 2 weeks before the sisters' encounter, Law enforcement officers in Coralville, about 70 miles south of where this took place, reported similar unexplained lights maneuvering in ways that defied conventional aviation capabilities. But here, guys, here's where it gets wild. Because Sister Xavier had mentioned that the objects she saw exactly matched the description of another UFO sighting earlier that summer by a student at the University of Kansas. But no, that's not the weird part. This is the info that you want. Sister Xavier was taking courses at that university at the time, but said that she felt that when the student had had that UFO sighting in the summer, that boy was just imagining things. She was at the Kansas University when a student had a UFO sighting. And the first thing she thought was, that boy's imagining things. What? Like, okay, now why is this relevant? Well, if we look at this from a religious perspective, just for a moment, where people are always trying to find meanings in everything and messages from God, couldn't that be interpreted as a message of, why did you not believe the poor child? You will now suffer the same fate. Because after this article was released, she was also ridiculed of, how could you have seen a UFO? You're crazy. You're out of your mind. You're drinking too much of that holy wine. And I bet there's other interpretations of that, and I really want to hear them from you, either in the live chat or in the comments, because for me, that was the first thing that came to mind when I was reading this. Is it because she didn't believe a student in the university that she was taking courses at, that maybe in her mentality she had to practically suffer the same fate of seeing something strange in the sky, telling people about it, and then those around her just not believing the incident? Do you see what I'm saying here? I want to hear it from you in the live chat right over here. Let's see. Chris says, but if she said that she saw an angel, she would have been believed. It's about that perspective. It's about that religious perspective and that environment. That would be really interesting, especially in today's world. Like today. If you were to tell someone, hey, I just saw an angel, what would be the odds that they would believe you more than saying, hey, I just saw a UFO outside? What do you think about that? Which one do you think people would believe more? Let me know down below in the comments and in the live chat as well. Dodge says, aren't UFOs mentioned in the Bible? There are some interpretations where people say yes. A great book was Chariot of the Gods that kind of dived into that perspective. So it's a possibility. And hello to everyone catching this live. Hello, John. Hello, Cindy. Hello, Hydes and Raphael and so many others. If you're enjoying the show, hit that like button right down below. I've always enjoyed looking at UFOs from a religious perspective. And while I don't do it publicly, because I know people are kind of iffy about religion, and I get that, but it's always interesting to see how ancient scriptures across religions have seen strange things and how today we could possibly explain them away as UFOs. And in this case, for 1965, it's classified as a modern case, even though it's a long time ago now, classified as modern. I really want to know how they struggled with this, how they really tried to find answers in the things that they saw, and what was the last straw on the camel's back for them to report it to a newspaper. They could have kept it to themselves, but instead they thought, no, I think the world needs to know about this. But this article came and left. We got this one snippet, and that is it. I could not find anything else. And if you can, send it on over to Cristina@strangeparadigms.com, because that's my email, because I couldn't find it. And I found that kind of strange. A lot of UFO sightings that have happened over the decades, you get quite a few reports, a handful. However, with this one, what makes it stand out is that during that same time frame in 1965, there were a lot of famous UFO sightings taking place. And in this case, for these two women, there were sightings happening in Iowa and in the surrounding states within weeks of this, which is worth mentioning. Don't you agree? Something else that we got to talk about is how other countries and other religions over the centuries, how they've documented strange sightings. And one of them took place in January of 1254 at the St. Albans Abbey. And this was according to the report by a monk. It says, under an 8-day old moon, he documented a large ship, elegantly shaped and of marvelous color, floating above the abbey. And this wasn't a casual observation. Medieval monks served as the scientific observers of their time. They were educated, they could read, which was huge in 1254 specifically. So not only were they teaching the word of God, but they were also just overall teaching basic education as well. So these guys were deemed very smart, very trustworthy, and very honest. And this was also during the time where they had to look at the sky at all times, recording astronomical events. So they were always looking up saying, okay, how are the stars, how are the planets aligned, how is the moon, what's going on, especially if they're trying to predict the future as well, kind of looking at prophecies, which has been common across cultures over the centuries as well. And so for in this case, for this report to come out in 1254, where it was written that it was a large ship that was elegantly shaped. I don't know what that means. Could be like cigar shaped if I had to take a guess. And with these beautiful colors as well. That's interesting. But got more for you. Because then, 6 centuries later, in 1884, Chan Buddhist monk Hsu Yun witnessed an extraordinary aerial display at the Daolu Peak in China. And in his autobiography, Empty Cloud, he talks about his UFO sighting, which he described as a large ball of light that split into 10 smaller orbs. And here's the book cover. And these lights moved with apparent intelligence, some rising and falling, while others crossed between mountain peaks. And he referred to these lights in his book as the wisdom lamps. And he also lived to be like 120 years old. Just an extra little detail to add in there, which is pretty crazy. But when we're looking at the year in the 1800s, these monks held a very similar status as they did in the 1200s. Looking at the previous report, they were not only teaching the word, in this case, the word of Buddha, but also these were educated people. They could read. So everyone's listening and everyone's taking every single word to heart as well. And this, even though he mentioned this to the world in the 1800s, he maintained his reputation as one of Chinese Zen Buddhists' most respected figures as well. And his 2-night observation eliminated common misidentification possibilities. So it didn't just happen once, it happened twice. He saw these wisdom lamps. That's how we described it. But maybe you've heard of this one. This one is decently famous. That took place October 13th, 1917, the Fátima incident. And this one took place in Portugal. And about 50 to 70,000 people gathered to witness what has become known as the miracle of the sun. And I'm only giving you a snippet of this encounter because it's a bit longer. But what happened here is that the crowd reported seeing the sun transform into a silver disc, emitting multicolored lights and moving in a zigzag pattern across the sky. And Father Ignacio also observed the phenomenon from 12 miles away, confirming the event's scope. Also, the Fátima incident did produce physical effects. Witnesses reported their rain soaked clothes, because it had rained just before this incident. Remember, I said to remember that? Remember that. Keep remembering it. And that the muddy ground dried instantly, and the Catholic Church declared this event worthy of belief in the year 1930. So it took place in 1917, and then the Catholic Church said in 1930, this was a miracle. We have the reports, we have the witnesses, something extraordinary really happened. Now, for this particular case, it was seen as a religious event. These three kids, they were visited by this light, and they said, come back a few weeks later, and I'm going to bestow you a miracle. However, you must keep praying with the rosary every single day, and then I will tell you what I want in return on this date. So these three kids, they're telling everyone. They're like, guys, you're not going to believe this. I saw this apparition. I think it was the Virgin Mary. I'm not really sure. And we got to be there in October to see what on earth happened, what's going to happen, and what this angelic being is going to ask from us. And at this time, no one's believing these kids. They're just children. They're like, you sound a little crazy. I don't really believe you. But they kept telling the same story. No details were varied. It was consistent. Then on October 13th, hundreds, thousands of people are going to this one location where the children said, this angelic apparition is going to show up right here. And it started raining. Everyone's drenched. They're cold. They're wet. They're like, kids, you're really killing me here. And then all of a sudden, this beautiful bright light comes up from this little hilltop. And this entity told the children and those around that she's like the goddess of rosary or the saints of rosary. And she said, I want you to build a chapel right where I'm standing. And so they ended up doing that. But thousands of people saw this. And then their clothes were completely dry, even though it had rained just a few moments later. And the Catholic Church says, what? This was a miracle. Let's write it in the books and let's make it into a holy day. And by the way, it was not the Virgin Mary. It was the Saintess, I don't think I'm saying that right, of Rosary. That's who it was, or who she said she was. But I got some more. Goddess of Rosary. Is that how you say it? Goddess of Rosary? Like, that makes more sense. So yeah, that's a cool little detail to that one. And that one has a lot more religious significance than the other ones. But I promise you, I have more. I have all the goods today. All the goodies. We got to bring up this one. Probably the most famous incident that involved a priest. And Father William Booth Gill's case from Papua New Guinea really is like not only an intense case, but a huge one in UFO history. And I have done an entire show on the case, as this is a fascinating one. But if you don't know about it, here's what happened. On June 26, 1959, at 6:45 p.m., Father Gill, a respected Anglican ministry and a Brisbane University graduate, observed a disc-shaped object with a wide base and a dome top. Father Gill and 37 other witnesses observed human-like figures on the craft's deck. Then shortly after, they saw an electric blue spotlight emanating from the object, and the craft descended to approximately 300 to 500 feet, really close enough for clear observation, and they could see beings in the craft on the dome part, which is crazy. But here's where it gets wild. Father Gill waved at the figures. He's like, "Hey." And the best part is, these beings waved back. This interaction was witnessed by dozens, including mission staff and local villagers in Papua New Guinea. And the encounter continued. Then the following evening, the next day, with a nurse first spotting the craft at 6 p.m. And Father Gill documented everything in an 11-page single-spaced report signed by over 25 witnesses. But then, here's another image, like a little drawing of what happened. But then, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, what does the J stand for? Who knows? My little trivia question for you. What does the J in J. Allen Hynek stand for? Well, he ends up interviewing Father Gill 15 years later, and he found him very credible. And so then this case was part of a larger UFO wave across the Pacific that summer. And then just 2 weeks later, a Pan Am Airways crew reported a similar craft 900 miles northeast of Hawaii, while witnesses in New Zealand and Australia reported comparable sightings. So then, the British Air Ministry attempted to dismiss the case as, oh, just a reflection of clouds, nothing to see here. That's how I imagine that they sound, just really annoying. And even though this was seen in Papua New Guinea, in Australia, in New Zealand, off the coast of Hawaii, and they were like, no, it's just clouds and nothing else. It's like, really, dude? And then, of course, you gotta bring in Mr. Debunker, Dr. Donald Manzel, or Menzel. I call him Manzel because I just feel like that just goes better with him, but it's Menzel. And he suggested, and giving my favorite explanation of all time, Father Gill, what he saw, those waving beings? No, sir. What he saw was just Venus. Because he wasn't wearing his glasses. Yeah, Father Gill was so silly, he didn't put on his glasses, and for 2 nights in a row, he just saw Venus. Those little waving beings, nah, it was nothing. But here's the best part. Here's what I love about Father Gill. Let's go back to that image. Is that he documented in his 11-page report, he was like, okay, Venus is right there. This craft is right over here. So, Dr. Menzel gets me every time, and his favorite explanation, it's always Venus with that man. And it kills me. But Father Gill, he was prepared, and he says, no, it was a UFO. It wasn't Venus. Townie, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, hi, Cristina. Always nice to wake up to your live show, especially when you're talking about cases down under. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And if you're enjoying the show, hit that like button right down below and subscribe if you enjoy UFO news, updates, case studies, interviews, and more. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows that happen right here. Now, you might be thinking, Cristina, all these UFO cases, they've happened decades ago. What's something new? What's something fresh? I told you. I brought the goods today. And this case, I did not know about. And the best part, we have picture evidence. Oh, I'm excited for this one. This one, hold up, took place in 2015, where technology finally caught with centuries of religious observers that have been reporting this for centuries. And at a Buddhist temple in China, a CCTV camera captured something interesting during a what weather phenomenon? During a rainstorm. There it is again, a rainstorm. And this security footage, oh, here's the temple, by the way, of where it happened. This security footage showed a shape shifting object that triggered the building's burglar alarm at around, guess what, 11 p.m. Just like the Clarke sisters' encounter that took place at around 11 p.m. And this incident would bridge ancient observations with modern verification. So you have Abbot Shi Jingkong and fellow monks who had discovered the footage during a routine security review. The burglar alarm went off. The abbot and the monks run down. The abbot's like the equivalent of a Catholic priest in some ways, kind of like he's up there. He's above the nuns and the monks, right? And so this object displayed characteristics that parallel historical religious UFO encounters. It morphed between multiple forms, changing shape from a flying saucer to an apple, and even resembling a sitting Buddha. Hold up, go back just for a second. We've heard about this before, about craft shapeshifting, not about sitting Buddhas, but about craft shifting. And there's this idea that this theory that's been passed down over the decades by now that sometimes a craft, a UFO, will shapeshift in the thing that you want to see. Like, let me give you an example. There have been reports of groups, multiple people seeing a UFO, and yet they're all seeing it at the same time, but they're seeing different shapes and different colors. Is that because of our previous encounters? Is it because of our own perspective that we morph the way that we see things and how our brain interprets it? Or is it the craft doing this crazy thing and it's changing the way it looks for everyone that's witnessing it? It makes sense that at a Buddhist temple, they would see a sitting Buddha, right? Maybe versus a Jesus. It would make sense. And in this case, they saw a flying saucer, an apple, and a sitting Buddha, according to some of the monks that saw this through the CCTV footage. Now, I only had the stills here. I don't have the actual footage, but here's another one. Now, I'm telling you, it just gets more interesting because not only did this thing shape shift, it entered the temple hall for approximately 10 seconds before departing. That's cool, right? But here's the interesting pattern. With both the Clarke sisters and the 2015 sighting, they both happened at 11 p.m., around 11 p.m., and after a thunderstorm. And for the Fátima miracle that took place in 1917, that also took place after a thunderstorm, but that was in the daytime. So what does this mean? What do these patterns mean? Well, there's a theory. And that theory is that these entities, these beings, whatever they might be, that don't vibrate at our human frequency, manifest better after storms due to the electrons in the air. Now, I know, sounds a little crazy. It's only a theory, but it's always worth putting the theories out there and then allowing you to make up your own mind. These encounters span diverse faiths, Christianity, Buddhism, and beyond, suggesting that whatever these phenomena are, they're not confined to any single religious framework, whether witnessed by medieval monks or modern surveillance systems. The core characteristics remain consistent: objects that defy conventional physics, displaying intelligent behavior, and interact with religious spaces in unexplained ways. What was your favorite case or detail that we covered here today? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comments as well. If you enjoyed the show, hit that like button right down below. And if you like UFO news, updates, case studies, interviews, and more, then subscribe to this channel to never miss a video. I want to say thank you to everyone catching this live, to the super chat, to all of my YouTube members, all of my Patreon and mods. You know I can't do this show without you. Before we even close this up, I want to read it in the live chat. What was your favorite case or detail that we covered right here? Mr. Webb, thank you. Great show as always. Be sure to hit that like button on the way out, as you should. Thank you for just giving that reminder out there. I like the Hsu Yun sighting. That was a good one. I had not heard of that one. I thought it was really, really good about the wisdom lamps. I was like, that's even a cool thing to call it. And with Fred Anderson, the Swedish UFO researcher, we spoke about how across cultures and across the years, the way people explain their UFO sightings, the vocabulary that they use differs. For Christopher Columbus, it was flying candlelights. In the Swedish story that Fred told me, it was a floating mushroom, which I thought was really cool. And then in this case from the 1800s, it was these wisdom lights or wisdom lamps. So we always see that shift and that change. And today it's drones. A few decades ago, it was swamp gas. We're getting all these different explanations, and it's really interesting to see that unfold in real time. Townie says Papua New Guinea. Oh, love that case. And if you really enjoy that case and you haven't seen the full video that I've done, I will place that link in the description box below for you once this live show is over. Dark saying, so great to see you. Fantastic presentation. Thanks for the live stream. Thanks for being here, Pete. Santos, thank you so much for the super chat. Great show. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Now, Dawn says motherships with drones at the Phoenix Lights. Those are all classics. All good stuff. Well, that is it for today. I will see you next time. Be safe and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.